The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, Caleb Hanks, and with me, as always, finally taking off his vampire cape and wiping off his makeup, taking off his fangs, Count Burgula is no more.
He's retired.
Yeah, he is retired. Well, at least for now. But Dr. Captain Austin Burgess is here with me. Brother, how was your spooky season?
It was a great spooky season. Pretty much checked all the boxes I could have hoped for.
Yeah, same. We covered a lot of really weird stuff.
And I got married.
And you got married. You're a married man. Look at you. Well, hey, man, congratulations.
Thank you, bro.
And welcome to the club.
There you go.
It's a great club to be in. Well, you know, spooky season may officially be over, but for us, it's always going to be a little spooky. And we're going to keep this train rolling, even though this episode is 100% not about a train, but it is about something a little unexpected.
Yeah, I didn't tell you that the train actually plays a pretty significant role in this episode.
Oh, son of a bitch. Okay, well, maybe that was just my premonition ability being able to tap into the wildness of it all.
You're remote viewing my mind or my notes, one or the other.
Yeah.
It's not a train itself, but I won't spoil anything. We'll get to that.
I don't go out of my body and fly around your mind. That's a huge invasion of privacy. But yeah, so tonight we're going to be talking about something one would not necessarily initially equate to there being some sort of subsequent haunting, but I think a decent amount of people that listen to this podcast would be familiar with the area that we're talking about. And this one is going to be going on down in Old Fort, North Carolina. I have never been able to drive by the Old Fort sign and say Old Fort, but this one takes place in Old Fort, North Carolina at an interesting spot known as Andrews Geyser. Now, when you mentioned to me, Dr. Burgula, that this was even a thing, that there was some sort of haunting associated with Andrews Geyser, I was like, okay, I'm with you, but like how? You know?
Yeah, well, it was completely off my radar as well. You know, like when you're flipping through any, haunted Asheville or any Western North Carolina paranormal resource, whether that's a book, whether that's just online blogs, pages, anywhere we kind of like typically dig for a lot of these local lore, you won't find Andrews Geyser mentioned, which is kind of interesting to me. And I think that's what really kind of hooked my attention in the first place is, we've covered a lot of the big names around here. This is one that I haven't even heard anything paranormal associated with to begin with.
Yeah, it's exciting to me because I do like doing the big ones, but we've had like a whole 5 weeks of big ones. I'm ready to take it back to something a little, indie punk rock haunting.
Yeah. So I do want to shout out our listener, Joe. He's actually the one that brought this to our attention, and kind of gave us a little bit of background on his personal experience and a little bit of just the creepy experience he's had there, which really kind of sent me down the rabbit hole on this. But yeah, it's something that I was super excited to dive into. Actually, wanted to go by the geyser, kind of ran out of time, but I've driven by the sign for the geyser countless times, but I've never actually turned off to go see it myself.
Oh yeah, I went to the geyser a million years ago. I was probably, I might have been younger than like 9. I remember it was the summertime and there were frog eggs all over the place.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's all I remember.
Good memory. So, I think now's a good time to just dive into it. As I mentioned a few months back, our listener Joe reached out, And he was actually requesting that we do an episode on this specific topic, diving into the history of Andrews Geyser. And of course, I kind of mentioned, this really caught my attention because I was aware of the monument and the area itself, but I had no idea that there was any sort of paranormal association with it.
Yeah, thanks for sending that along, Joe. Really, very appreciate it. Because, I love getting tips about just these things you would never think of that hauntings are associated with. Is awesome.
Right, and thanks for bearing with us on this. We kind of had a chunk of episodes already pre-planned out with some of our guests and, our spooky season lineup. But this one's definitely been on the back of my mind for a little bit for episodes I wanted to cover next. So excited to get into it.
Hell yeah.
So according to our listener, Joe, his family owned a summer camp that was really close to the geyser area, or really the geyser itself. He says it was a really special and sentimental place for him and his entire family. In fact, his grandparents' final wishes were to have their cremated ashes spread at the geyser because of all the fond memories spent in the area from owning the camp up there. And, I think this is really touching for a lot of people because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that can relate to a place like this that kind of holds this special significance to their family, I guess. Like, whether that's somewhere that you've just got a lot of like really foundational childhood memories, like fondly looking back on times when, life was simpler and stuff like that, or whether it was like places where the remains of loved ones or ashes of loved ones were spread, that holds its own spiritual significance. And in this case with Joe and his family, you've got this area that represents both for them. So I think that this was really kind of significant to kind of note. And kind of recently, not too much off topic here, but I was recently chatting with Carrie King, who's a descendant of the King family from the Snippy the Horse episode. He runs the Snippy convention on a property out there in the San Luis Valley, very near the original King family ranch where the Snippy incident occurred. And he told me that his grandfather's ashes were spread at the corners of this property out there. And he claimed that since this has been done, it's not only increased some of just the spiritual and high strangeness energy present on the property, but he says it also kind of serves as a protection for them against some of those, trickster entities that are commonly associated with the valley and other areas, kind of like the Uinta Basin that we've talked about. So I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel to bring up for this story, that this is a conversation I literally had this week, and then jumping back to Joe's story, revisiting this here with his family's or grandparents' ashes being spread in that area. Thought that was at least noteworthy to bring up.
Man, when we were going through all the stuff in spooky season and like looking at different things that we could cover, and not to mention just watching things on my own time, I end up watching like a lot of shows about hauntings, a lot of just kind of random things on, Amazon and Netflix. I try to find like the most, unwatched stuff so I can find just like stories that not a lot of people have heard. But I've started to notice way more than I ever had seen before, just like the different little measures that people take for protection if a place is like haunted, and the putting the salt in the corners. I'd always heard of like, maybe making like a line or like a circle or something like that, but I didn't know that the putting the salt in the corners was a thing. So I assume that if you have like the ashes of a relative that you loved and trusted, that's like some extra augmented protection.
Deep
there.
protection. Yeah. Especially someone that was, a descendant of the land who was native to that area.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's a very interesting parallel for sure. But to jump back to Joe's story, the camp was actually sold to new owners sometime around 1980. And around this time, I guess, maybe a little bit later, Joe put in his will, like his grandparents, he also wanted to have his ashes spread around Andrews Geyser just due to those fond childhood memories and connection to his family there. So fast forward to sometime around 2015, and Joe decided to bring a date to Andrews Geyser to have a picnic. And obviously, this being a sentimental spot for him, this was something that he was excited to share with his date. And they timed out their picnic so it'd be right around the time of sunset so they could watch that, with the background of the geyser there and everything. And everything was nice and beautiful until the sun actually went down and the darkness set in. Joe says that both him and his date started to get this really creepy feeling, one like they were just surrounded in the darkness, but that feeling where you could almost sense like something else is present. Can't tell exactly what it is, but you almost know that feeling where it's almost like that sixth sense where you could feel someone's eyes on you, watching you. I think that's pretty similar to what Joe and his date were describing with this.
Yeah, we told a story not dissimilar from this not too long ago on the podcast, and I'm like, I swear to God, if it's Ted Bundy.
No, not quite. Well,
I hope not.
I can't debunk that at the time, but I would probably think not.
Yeah, even though that guy seemingly can teleport.
Yeah, right. So anyways, they were really creeped out by this just shared feeling that they didn't want to stick around and investigate. And Joe said, like, this isn't something that he's commonly just susceptible to. It's not something that he freaks out about easy. So take that with, a grain of salt, knowing that this location was the first time he'd ever felt something like that. And it was so significant for him. In fact, he said that he no longer wished to have his ashes spread at the geyser after this experience because he felt there was something just dark there.
Oh, man.
Which is pretty big for a place that he had this pretty strong significance for him to make that decision that there's something that heavy in the atmosphere there that made him no longer wish to have that as his final resting place, if you will.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever actually been someplace that I felt just like this inherent unexplained sense of dread that intensely before. So
Yeah.
that's pretty significant.
Yeah, for sure. So this is why he said he reached out to us and asked if we could dive into some of the paranormal history of this location so he could learn more about what's potentially going on there, because it's something that he experienced, but I don't think he has answers for what's going on. I don't know if we could completely provide those for him, because there's a lot of mystery out there in this world. But we dig into some interesting, pretty dark history associated with the area that could shed some light on some of this, feelings of dread that we talked about.
Well, you're the guy to go to, Dr. Bergman.
So I guess we need to start off with a little bit of general history and background for the geyser itself to set the stage here. And I'm sure you knew this, but unlike the geysers that you guys went out to visit in Yellowstone recently, this one's actually man-made.
Yeah, it's man-made, which I have a lot of questions about. Yeah,
to me, that just kind of makes it sound like it's a really big fountain. But either way,
how does that work? I mean, I'm assuming you're going to tell us how that works.
A little bit. I mean, I think the name geyser is just kind of I'm going to say it's like a showy tourism name for it. But, the thing does shoot 80 feet in the air. And from pictures I've seen, it looks impressive.
Andrew's pressurized water hose.
I think the idea from what I understand is that it funnels in water from like significantly higher up in elevation. So it's almost like building up a lot of pressure with the gravitational effect of everything running through the tubing. So it builds up the pressure for it to shoot the water, project the water in a similar fashion as a geyser, but it's a fountain.
Yeah.
So
weird. I mean, that's so weird because I only really saw that this week when we were starting to look into some of this stuff and had no idea that was a man-made geyser. I had no idea you could make a man-made geyser.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's like the craziest thing in the world, but it's just kind of weird. But I saw, I guess maybe my first real geyser just like a month or so ago. I saw Old Faithful while I was in.
I think this ain't no Old Faithful.
Yeah.
So
Old Faithful was it was faithful. It was like right on the money when they said it was going to go off. I was like, dang, that's kind of wild.
That's pretty cool.
Good for it. Still working.
Yeah, there you go. So this particular geyser was actually named after Colonel Alexander Boyd Andrews, who was a North Carolina native and vice president of the Southern Railway Company. There's the train coming into play a little bit. He was actually one of the first people responsible for the construction of the railroad between Old Fort and Asheville in the early 19th century, or late 19th century. Sorry. So Andrews Geyser, from everything I've seen, was originally built in 1885. I've seen a couple sources that claim 1879, but I think there's a bit of a misconception with that and some of the railroads surrounding the area. But the geyser was essentially built as a tourist attraction for people traveling by train. The property, it was built on the property surrounding what was known as the Round Knob Hotel, which was this 5-story resort hotel that really became this popular tourist destination and a new stop on the rail line. So you got to think about it, like the rail line is a very new thing, and to have a train go directly up to this 5-story resort, like it's almost like a special destination stop when you could travel to a place like that directly by rail.
Yeah.
So the geyser was kind of created just to kind of spruce up the property, if you will. So like during these days, visitors from all over the eastern part of the Carolinas were traveling up to the mountains for the cooler summer months. And it's when, that kind of created this atmosphere of, I guess just a different form of luxury up there. And the geyser really added to that. So as I kind of mentioned previously on how this was created, the engineers dammed a mountain spring and laid pipeline downhill to create a gravity-generated fountain, essentially, which apparently in its prime could spew up to 250 feet in the air with water, which seems pretty freaking impressive.
Oh, yeah.
And the other cool thing that I failed to mention here was the geyser was also supposed to be like this eye-catching part of the railroad ride into this area to begin with. As you're kind of ascending the track, it would go through 6 tunnels and kind of loop around the Swannanoa Gap. And the geyser itself could be seen at several spots along the train ride anyway. So it was kind of like a landmark to look for while you're riding the train to begin with.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then the more interesting part about it, and I guess probably alluding to the original geyser in its prime, could shoot 250 feet in the air. But the geyser was actually originally located somewhere else than it is today. And that is directly below where the Round Knob Hotel stood, which kind of makes it confusing. Like it's changed locations, but it is still referred to as Andrews Geyser. And it didn't change locations too far. I think it's still the same general area, but yeah, it kind of, I guess the story tells the whole background on it here. In 1903, the Round Knob Hotel was actually burned to the ground. And in 1910, George Fisher Baker, who was this wealthy New York banker, he missed seeing the geyser when he was in the area riding through on the train. So it was kind of like a big landmark or just kind of a check off the box for him when he's in the area. So he asked the Southern Railway and the owner then at the time to let him restore the geyser in the honor of his friend, Alexander Boyd Andrews, who had served as the president of the Western North Carolina Rail Line, as I mentioned. And by 1911, Baker had bought the land at the Round Knob, restored the geyser, and named it officially Andrews Geyser. And he constructed this, what is described as a 5-lobed pool around the base, kind of like these interesting, it's almost like a star shape, but they're in rounded formation instead of a point.
Oh, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And yeah, so he donated and set this all up to be maintained by Southern Railway, which they promised to do and maintain after it's been all pretty much taken care of for them. But then, as these things happen, the railroad didn't really upkeep the geyser. And in the early 1970s, I guess one of the pipeline pieces broke and the basin was filled with mud. And the whole cove where the geyser was just became completely overgrown. And then in 1975, the town of Old Fort basically went to the railroad and was like, hey, this looks like shit. Can we buy this from you and clean it up and turn it into something?
Yeah.
And railroad company couldn't really complain. It wasn't a bad deal for either party there. So in May of 1976, a restored Andrews Geyser was open to the public there. And like I mentioned, the water supply is drawn from a pond that's located at the current site of the inn at Mill Creek, which is kind of a local bed and breakfast in the air. And the inn's property contains the original dam that was constructed by the railroad company in the late 19th century that the geyser was pulling from. And, the pond formed by the dam that would, essentially be used to funnel down in this gravitational way to shoot the water up. From what I've seen, the area, Old Fort kind of got hit pretty hard with some stuff around Helene. So I think for a while they were closed. I looked on the Destination McDowell website, and it says the current update is Andrews Geyser is intermittently working at this time. The town of Old Fort plans to assess and repair the geyser over the course of the next year, and feel free to reach out to the town of Old Fort for more information.
Well, hopefully they can get it back to its prime where it's blasting 250 feet in the air. Could you imagine how traumatizing that would be if you're a kid and it's just like knocking a buzzard out of the air? Oh, slap.
I didn't see any pictures where it was shooting that high, so maybe it was some of those old timer stories for they said back in my day, yeah, 80 feet ain't nothing.
Back in my day, that thing would shoot 500 feet in the air, and I tell you what, there's nothing more traumatizing than being hit by a wet buzzard.
Yeah, so definitely thought that was interesting, and I guess, like I said, the original location must have had a little bit more juice to get that thing shooting a little higher up, as opposed to where they kind of relocated it a little farther downhill, from what I could tell. Still the same general area, but just interesting. I guess that it had gone to such bad upkeep from the hotel burning down and not being attended for 7 years that they kind of just took the pipeline and moved it a little farther down.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, there's a trail marker here noting one of the last skirmishes of the Civil War taking place there in April of 1865. There were troops led by Union General Alvin C. Gilman, and they were traveling home towards Tennessee. I guess they had recently led a raid down in Morganton. But then this is when they encountered troops under Confederate General James G. Martin. And Martin heard that Gilliam's troops were approaching this area around where the geyser is, and strategically placed his 700 men along the top of the Swannanoa Gap, kind of where the train used to come through overlooking the geyser. And when Gilliam's troops attempted to ascend the gap, Martin basically successfully trapped all these troops in like this crossfire of horseshoe fire going on there, and they were forced to just turn around and go the other way.
But okay, so this is like way before the geyser was even there.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I was gonna say it's kind of hard to fight in a geyser.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, this is before the creation of that. So that's kind of the first story, just alluding to,
just some weirdness going on.
A little bit of weirdness, a little bit of emotionally heavy dark history, as I would call it.
I mean, I'm assuming somebody died there.
Yeah. I mean, imagine when you're in that kind of crossfire, basically surrounded on all sides, you're going to lose some troops.
Yeah, no doubt.
So that's the first example I have of a little bit of a dark history, if you will, associated with the area. But another thing to remember is, before the railroads carved its path into the Blue Ridge Mountains, like all this was having to be traveled by horseback or foot or anything like that. So it's not like these guys had another easier option for escape. They basically had to go all the way back around and go the long way to Tennessee.
Yeah,
so
they were like in the death bowl.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as I mentioned, before the railroads were in this area, that actually started to happen in 1855. North Carolina legislator issued a charter for Western North Carolina Railroad to begin laying track, basically extending up from Salisbury beyond the Blue Ridge Mountains to the Western North Carolina area as we know it. But, as you know, the outbreak of the Civil War happened, and construction kind of got pushed to the back burner there for a little bit. And it wasn't until 1869 that the first track was actually laid in Old Fort proper area down by the geyser. So due to the steep grade, and I guess there was some internal corruption among some of the people that were granted money in the railway company to complete the line, the continuation of the track into Asheville was bit indefinitely delayed for a while. But in 1875, because these cash-strapped conditions with some of the corruption, some of the railroad officials just pocketing this government grant money that was supposed to go towards finishing the project, kind of left them cash-strapped, unable to complete it due to the embezzlement. So the railroad corporation turned to something known as leasing convicts to assist with finishing the construction of the railroad. So convict leasing apparently was kind of common at the time, but a lot of sources say it's kind of an early example of just the oppressive Jim Crow laws that were haunting Black people in the South post-Civil War, post-slavery, just people that were stuck in that mindset and still trying to find a way to take advantage of that corrupt system.
Right.
So in all, from everything I've seen, more than 3,000 men and several hundred women, all former slaves, were sent to the penitentiary in Raleigh, and they were sentenced to physical labor. They were sentenced to either work on projects such as building a railroad or maintaining and cooking at some of these work camps where some of the workers were being housed. Most of these inmates were unjustly imprisoned on false charges and convicted under this Jim Crow system, where it was basically used as a legal extension for slavery, trying to work around that system.
Right. Abducting essentially just innocent people and then making them do what you want. Yeah,
you could put whatever. I mean, if you want to hear a prime example, even 100 years later on how this was still happening in Asheville, you could listen to the Helen Clevenger Battery Park Hotel episode just to hear. You could slap a charge on anything, and that was kind of the word back in the day.
Yep.
So these workers, they worked under pretty harsh conditions. That's 6 days a week in all types of weather, extremely dangerous conditions, mudslides, cave-ins were constant threats. Because you got to think, as you can imagine, they're going from Old Fort all the way up the mountain
Yeah.
to build the railroad there. So they're dealing with some extremely treacherous conditions. The clothes they were provided, I saw there's actually a picture of this that we could share. It's your traditional black and white striped prison guard. It said they were extremely thin, cotton, and they weren't given any coats. The diets that they were provided, the food, the rations they were provided was cans of beans and cornbread.
And they're like working through the winter and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. For 4 years straight.
Oh my
and their
God.
sleeping quarters were apparently just box cars that were reused and repurposed as sleeping quarters.
God, dude.
So nothing in the way of insulation. And yeah, as I mentioned, over 4 years, this group worked to expand the railroad from the area, basically of Old Fort, right around Andrews Geyser and that hotel area up into Asheville. And I guess reportedly I saw 1879 was when the railroad officially made its way to Asheville. So for the time being and those extreme conditions, they worked tirelessly to crank that out over 4 years for whatever technological limitations there were in the time. Like that's a pretty extreme turnaround, I would say.
Gosh, no doubt.
Much of the work was done either by hand or with picks, shovels, steel drills. And it was just, what you would expect. Extremely hard physical labor in extremely dangerous conditions.
Yeah.
Deadly accidents were pretty much commonplace, but the work continued. There was a report that some inmates that were insubordinate were shot by guards and others just died. I guess nitroglycerin was used as a big explosive for clearing out some of these mountain passes.
Yeah.
And, it's probably not the safest operating conditions on some of that. So it sounds like there were a lot of lives lost to cave-ins and just explosive accidents that happened.
Oh, I'm sure that they were like, we got to do something dangerous. You guys go ahead and set those charges.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Because, from what I've seen, where this rail line would go through, there were 7 tunnels that would have to go through. So that's pretty significant chunks of mountain you were having to blast through.
Oh, no doubt.
So it seems like that was a pretty common catalyst in the loss of lives there. And this is a sad part that I read, that because the railroad could, essentially just lease a convict if they had accidents occur, these deaths weren't very respectfully treated, is the best way to put it. There wasn't a lot of documentation of them. As I mentioned, it was just kind of a number. They'll lease someone else from the prison system. And
do you know if they even took the bodies somewhere else?
they did. They are buried somewhere. From what I've seen, that still is kind of a mystery of where they are. Because, as you can imagine, this is a pretty long stretch down from Andrews Geyser all the way up to the mountain.
Yeah.
So from what penitentiary records show from that time frame, they estimate 139 inmates total died during this project, but that number's assumed to actually be higher than what they could actually documentally prove.
Well, do you know how many people were working on this total?
Yeah, I think they said it was probably, I believe, well, they had 3,000 people that were assigned to physical labor from that Raleigh penitentiary. Not all those were working on it. Some of those were people kind of tending to the camp, but you got to imagine at least 2,000 of those were probably workers on the project.
Oh, man.
But so, yeah, 139 in the grand scale of things with the dangerous conditions
That's
probably
ton of people. Good Lord.
Ton of people, but it's probably a low estimate on some of the actual numbers.
Oh, man.
These are the names that they were able to trace back to people they could find documentation for, essentially. So yeah, like I said, many of the people who lost their lives in this project just went unrecognized for years. It's not like there was a monument put up. There was no gravestone. It's not like their bodies were sent back to families to be buried at home. These were state inmates. So as I mentioned, there's records that they were buried somewhere, but where these graves are is essentially kind of a mystery and unmarked to this day. But very recently, there was a little bit of recognition for this crew of people. So fast forward closer to modern times, and after years of research, Steve Little, who is an attorney, and he's actually the mayor of Marion, the nearby town, there basically next to Old Fort, which is in McDowell County, also home to the Western North Carolina Bigfoot Festival. To tie that in a little bit.
I'll be down there this weekend.
Oh no, yeah. He got Beard Fest, Beard Stock.
Beard Stock. I think it is. I think we did land on Beard Stock, but
that sounds better.
Yeah, playing a gig with the bro and some folks down there.
There you go. So anyways, mayor of Marion, which is a funny phrase, Steve Little, actually wrote 2 books about the railway and actually developed a one-man play that provided kind of a dramatized version of the construction, but through the eyes of a prisoner.
Wow.
So I thought this was pretty big for a mayor of a town to go dive into his area's history and do so much to bring some of this stuff to the public awareness, and
That's
try to
really
do
cool.
it is a bit of an honor.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, UNCA history professor Dan Pierce was spending a significant amount of his time researching just some of the troubled history of convict labor in North Carolina and the whole system surrounding that and some of these least help or workers. And in 2021, he suggested, after meeting with Steve Little, that they form an organization to create a memorial to the men and women who built the railway. And it was actually named, as an acronym, the RAIL, Railroad and Incarcerated Laborers. So it's a memorial project that was basically created in October of 2021. And they built kind of a commemorative monument that was crafted by someone in the area named Paul Twitty II. Now, I have a friend in Marion named Brian Twitty, and he might be related. Who knows? It's a small area down there. So
Yeah.
shout out Brian if you somehow happen to be listening to this. It's pretty cool that your relative helped create this and got to be a part of helping create this monument. And it is kind of just a dedicational stone is kind of what I would describe it as. It's obviously dedicated to the workers who died during the construction, and the monument reads, "Dedicated to the incarcerated workers who died in the construction of the Mountain Division of Western North Carolina Railroad between 1875 and 1879. Workers, most of whom were African American, arrested under unjust Jim Crow laws, put in place as an extension of slavery, labored under dangerous, brutal, and unhealthy conditions." And then the monument goes on to list all the names of the known incarcerated railroad workers who died while working on this project, stating that many of these persons were state prisoners who were forced to work on this railroad. So it's not like they were putting these people gave their lives to this railroad. No, it's not framed like that. It's framed as a respectful, almost remorseful honor to them, which,
Sure.
I know a single stone can't make up for a tragedy that, this whole project was, but at least we could say something is being done to sort of honor their memory and legacy in some form.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I don't know where your head's at with it, but I would not be surprised at all, with as little regard as they had for these workers, if they literally were just like, okay, well, they died. I don't know, take them a couple of yards out that way and just bury them.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of alluded to, because I the rail project continues on to this day, trying to bring awareness to the incarcerated laborers. And they're still trying to work to install kind of wayside markers along this whole trail and line of the railroad, just because what they're doing at Andrews Geyser is great, but that is one stop on what was a pretty long stretch of railroad there. So I think they're trying to work, and Pierce was actually quoted as saying, "We would like to eventually positively confirm the location of graves. It may be impossible, but it would be nice to finally mark those graves."
Yeah.
So I think that just shows that they're still working to dig into history and kind of hopefully discover some of the location of these graves and be able to give a little bit more of a tribute for some of these people's unfortunate final resting places.
Man, I mean, at least from the standpoint of, I think if I had passed away in that situation, and in the event that one is sentient post being here in the corporeal realm, I think that there's probably some unrest to be had for the entities or the souls that are left out there. I mean,
yeah, I mean, we've touched on the concept of slavery before, thinking back specifically like to the Smith McDowell episode.
I was going to say the Smith McDowell episode went into that a lot. And I mean, like, in a lot of ways, these workers had it a hell of a lot worse than, Yeah,
because slavery was illegal at the time. They were freed under a system and then falsely imprisoned because people couldn't give up that way of life, I guess.
Yeah, I guess not. That just, to me, is so sad to think. It also reminds me of kind of like the Phantom Hiker of Grandfather Mountain thing. It's just like when you come down the highway, coming through some of those mountains, going down into Old Fort, those are some pretty like impressive, towering mountains up there that
No joke, yeah.
I don't know. There's a little bit of a strange air about them. I've kind of always felt that way. And now I know a little bit more of why they seem a little odd.
Yeah, maybe so. And I know that the geyser was a big, stop along the railroad. And that was kind of a central focal point for that area. And it's great that that's being recognized. And I'm sure that a lot of those deaths probably did occur in that Andrews Geyser area. Because if you look at some of those old photos where the original geyser was, where the railroad goes, was significantly higher than where the geyser was placed itself. So it looked pretty treacherous. But again, there's probably still stretches of miles that, kind of still have these undocumented tragedies attached to them.
I'm assuming that the way that they would go about trying to actually find out where these people were potentially buried is just to try to sift through whatever records they could find. And if there's any note of an incident and any note of where that possibly could be, they could maybe kind of go around the area.
That's kind of what I've gathered on that. And I think that's how they pieced together all the names that are present on that monument.
Right.
Was going through the old prison records. And then obviously, regardless if deaths were respectfully honored, they were at least documented by the rail company.
Yeah.
And you could probably, sadly, whether, look at it and have to trace it back, it could just be a tally of, one in, one out to see how many more they were getting, just with the kind of disregard they had for human life on the way that was treated. So, I think you talk about areas that just carry such a heavy emotional history, and sometimes that's maybe imprinted in the area. I don't know. I know that kind of gets into the pseudoscientific topics of stone tape theory that we did bring up on the Phantom Hiker episode. But I think that it's an interesting correlation that we've noticed multiple time and time again, that areas that have these reported haunted experiences tend to be linked with some either dark or emotionally heavy energy or past to them.
Well, I tell you what, though, I'm very, very excited that Joe brought this to our attention, because your ability to look into this stuff and our ability to have this podcast that can get the message out that even though we might not know exactly where some of these people are buried, at least there is some thought going into this. I think there's going to be obviously more people finding out about this. I obviously had no idea that this was even a thing.
And it's sort of interesting to me, because this seems like a piece of history that would be ripe for Western North Carolina paranormal stories. When you have such a mass tragedy, I think it's a big stretch of land, but it's still you would think that this kind of has all the makings for a spooky story, yet there really isn't one, at least in the public, people are talking about, that you see in, published around Halloween time or in the books and stuff like that.
But there could be a lot of people that have seen some weird stuff around the railroads and just haven't really talked too much about it.
True, which is kind of a nice segue into the next part here that I dove into was, okay, Joe had a pretty creepy experience. Let's see if we could just dig into the internet and find anyone else that might be talking about something weird they experienced specifically at the geyser. And lo and behold, Joe isn't the only one to have reported seeing some unnerving things or just having unnerving experiences to begin with at Andrews Geyser.
Leave it up to Dr. Captain Burgess to find the dirt.
So this one actually comes from a Reddit post where one user on Reddit claims that the whole area over there just has a really scary, bad feeling, especially at night. Well, there's similarity. It feels like something watching from the darkness and slowly coming towards you. It's bad all around the geyser, but especially up the dirt road that goes from Mills Creek, Old Fort to Black Mountain. So I guess there's a kind of a dirt road off to the side there that supposedly has some creepy vibes, because another Reddit user responded to that comment saying, about 10 years ago, my husband's car broke down on that dirt road. Apparently it was the alternator, but he said the lights dimmed and the car stopped altogether and wouldn't restart. It was late at night and I had to drive from Asheville to go pick him up. I helped him get some stuff from his car, and we got back in my car and it wouldn't start.
Oh,
Super creepy.
Whoa.
We also didn't have cell service and had to walk to an inn to use their phone. Super expensive because we had to get both cars towed back to Asheville and then take a cab. I've never heard anything else about this area until now. So that one's pretty damn weird to me.
Very.
You talk about energy being drained. We've heard that in battery situations.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Usually on a smaller scale, it likes to drain phone batteries, camera batteries, that sort of stuff.
2 car batteries drained.
But it's not completely out of the realm of what we've heard about. I mean, obviously you've heard about cars stalling out, but the big one's Helen's Bridge. People always talk about the car stalling out up there.
Yeah, for sure. And then another commenter kind of joined in and said, I've never been around there at night, but the dirt road is definitely spooky. And maybe a little spookier around the geyser. I've always thought this was because the train tracks are so much higher than you, even though I rarely see trains there. It does feel like someone's watching you from above.
Man.
So, really interesting common thread. Like everyone that's talking about things happening there, it's that same feeling of those eyeballs on the back of you almost. And, you know, I've experienced that. I think there's psychological experiments you can do to have, you know, someone essentially focus their intention, their eyes almost staring at you to see if you could feel some sort of change or experience in that.
Oh yeah.
And it's an interesting thought and concept. And the fact that pretty much all the reports we see coming from this area have that listed on there. So I think that's pretty interesting and definitely gives some credence to what Joe said he experienced out there.
Oh, well, dude, God, I'm going to be there in like 2 days.
Yeah, you gotta stop by.
I'm like, I got to find this road. It sounds creepy as hell.
Yeah. And there's more. There's more weird stuff in that area. So as I mentioned, like the original Round Knob Hotel burned down in like the early 1900s.
I blame the boojum.
You know, he's out for those little boutique hotels.
Yeah, he burnt that first one. He was out for revenge. Or out for seconds.
But actually, nowadays, there's a hotel out there known as the Round Knob Lodge. And around Halloween, they host historic haunted house tours. They kind of have a guide, walk you through the house, telling a little bit of history on the lodge. And then they take you down an area known as the Haunted Hallway, where several of the lodge guests on this tour, and even just guests in general, have reported capturing ghostly orbs in their photographs. So kind of interesting there. And I think it's cool that this place is playing into the history of the area a little bit, knowing that there is a little bit of a haunted association with that, and trying to, you know, we talk about so many of these hotels and bed and breakfasts either completely avoiding the subject or completely playing into it. So I always think it's cool when you find ones that really play into it.
Oh, hell yeah.
And then started digging on YouTube, and there's a video on there from a channel known as Airing After Midnight that tells the story of someone named Jordan who visited the geyser after dark in October. Now, Jordan claimed that he was a historian just visiting the area to learn more about the original hotel that was there and the railroad and kind of how it just built and carved its way through the mountains to reach this, what was elaborate destination at the time. So he's walking around the perimeter of the geyser, and he says he begins to hear footsteps, turns around and sees no one. But when he turned back towards the geyser, he says he saw a tall, dark figure standing at the other edge of the water. Pretty creepy. The video goes on, and now I will say the longer you listen to the story, the more dramatic and less believable it becomes.
Yeah.
So take that for what you will, but I did think it was interesting enough to share because it does kind of have some of these similar elements to what we've discussed before. Maybe it's just, you know, a little bit embellished for a dramatic and spooky effect. I'll let you kind of be the judge the authenticity yourself if you want to look it up. It's just called The Ghost of Andrews Geyser. But I did think it was interesting enough because there's some of these similar elements there. Just maybe these shadow figures being watched, something like that. And if nothing else, it's another spooky, ghostly story that is, whether it's documented through a YouTube video, there's documentation of something creepy going on there. So I thought it was worth sharing.
I assume that like people that are from there and are familiar with the geyser and grew up around that area, maybe they know a little bit more about the history of like, you know, the battles and things that took place. But at least from somebody that was not completely aware of anything like that, I do wonder how much about the history of the geyser the people that have reported having uneasy feelings and being spooked out by the place, I wonder how much knowledge they had of that, because if they didn't really, that's kind of an interesting control for, okay, here are these people that don't know anything about this kind of, you know, shady, dark history about this place, and yet they're all experiencing something weird. That's a pretty cool paranormal experiment, really, or a case study, really.
Yeah, I like that angle on that. Man, that is a cool way to look at it. And you think, going back to Joe's story, I mean, this was a place this was his place. This was his spot.
100%, dude.
Going from that to, I had such a uneasy experience or feeling there that I no longer want this to be my final resting place. That's a pretty big emotional swing right there to have at a place you have that connection with, and then to have other people that report something eerily similar to that.
Now I'm kind of like, dude, we got to go.
Yeah, right. So yeah, leading into that, there's one more YouTube video I found on the Cheap Geek YouTube channel. And there's an interview between the two hosts or two people on this episode. And one of the hosts is kind of going into the history of Masonic connections and structures like this. And he kind of tries to make an argument that the geyser has some sort of Masonic symbology and connections to it that kind of lead to some of this high strangeness and paranormal experience associated with the area. I didn't follow too much of that. It's interesting to think about, but I think what they got into later was even more interesting to me, because they did talk about multiple people having that similar uneasy feeling that Joe had in the area, that creepy, ominous feeling of just being watched. The video even referred to a rake type creature being reported at a crossroads in this area, which I thought was pretty damn timely after our last episode.
What is up with all the rakes?
I know. They kind of talked back and forth on this, and I guess they alluded to a crossroads being almost like a supernatural power for this type of activity, almost making it a bit of a window area, like we talked about just last week in the rake episode.
Look at the consistent report, though. The potential for this entity in our last episode about the rake. There was
a Civil War guy.
Well, he described seeing somebody that looked like they were in like old world clothes.
Yeah.
And this is right by this battleground.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, think about some of the stuff people have reported around Gettysburg. I mean, that whole place is 20 miles. It's a 20-mile stretch of nothing but battleground, and people have gotten all kinds of crazy videos. Hell, I experienced a weird thing there because my pedestrian detection on my car started going off.
With
like
no one around?
Nobody there, dude.
Wild.
And this was out in the middle of you're basically driving through the fields where there's nobody there.
That's pretty creepy.
In the battleground, yeah.
So yeah, the host of this video also drew connections to the Civil War incident I mentioned, where they were kind of horseshoed in. And as you imagine, some lives were lost. And one of the hosts even started recapping some of the cryptid sightings that he's had reported directly to him in the Andrews Geyser area. One of them being Sasquatch. I think that kind of is on brand with the Bigfoot festival happening down right around that area. You know, there's quite a few localized sightings of Sasquatch Bigfoot that I've heard around McDowell County.
Yeah.
And then he's even had someone report a Dogman sighting to him, which is even more funny because that's another one we talked about last week.
Yeah, the Dogman, he's getting a lot of play these days.
Right.
It's kind of wild.
And this was interesting because they were on site. They were almost at a picnic table right in the Andrews Geyser area. And they had an EMF meter with them, and it had been on the whole interview. And then they started talking about some of this stuff right around the time they're talking about Dogman. This thing starts beeping and going off during the interview. So maybe bring your tri-field when you go down there this weekend.
Hell yeah. Well, dude, that's the other thing. Is like when you start talking about it, that's when the shit starts going off.
Yeah.
In the Faces of Evil thing about the Ted Bundy thing. Come on. He didn't show up till we started talking shit.
Yeah, right. So
that's crazy, man.
I thought all those together with the common thread of just that feeling of being watched, that feeling of dread, just like you could tell something's there with that almost sixth sense, but you can't really identify or physically see it.
Yeah.
That being a common thread across pretty much every one of those stories was really telling to me because it mirrors exactly what Joe reached out to us with. And I love that because this was completely off the radar for us. And here we go, dig into what Joe sent us and find a pretty big handful of people that have had a shockingly similar experience there.
Man, that is such a find. That is so crazy. Like, I never would have thought in a million years that Andrews Geyser would be just associated with anything like this.
Right, yeah. And again, I know that all of these deaths that occurred during this railroad construction didn't all happen at Andrews Geyser, but the fact that that's where the memorial monument stands today kind of leads me to think that was probably a pretty significant chunk, and this is probably where construction really started. So as they were figuring things out, sadly, there probably were a lot of lives lost in that direct area. And
no doubt.
And kind of going back to what we talked about, just sometimes such heavy emotional energy can almost leave an imprint on areas, or maybe areas are just already primed to situations like that are these, whatever you want to call it, window areas, hot spots, portals, whatever you say. But I think you kind of almost have to at least, well, to say consider that theory, but at least entertain it, because you have experiences of cryptids being sighted in that area, of whatever, shadow entities, of that feeling of being watched. And it almost just provides a parallel to what we heard last week with, sure, the rake appeared out there, and as you alluded, the person in Old World clothes. These things are seemingly not the same experience, but there's separate weird things happening in the same area.
And sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is super bizarre. You know, over spooky season, like I was saying, I watch a lot of just different random kind of ghost programs and look into a lot of different just YouTube videos of different hauntings and stuff like that. And the amount of ghost stories that I have seen just this year that involve Civil War or Revolutionary soldiers that are attaching themselves or just showing up in people's houses and areas around where that stuff happened. I mean, it really kind of makes you start to think, if you die in such a quick, violent way, but you die in this like very heightened state of emotion, because I mean, like, you're literally in a battle. You know that people are gunning for you, and you die in that way. I mean, it seems to me that these entities, these people, just, they cannot leave after that traumatic experience.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I just see a lot of correlation between these weird things and the battlefield stuff. And I mean, obviously, you know, it's not like a unknown thing. There's always stories about hauntings near battlefields and stuff like that. But it really starts getting weird when you're having like multiple reports of cryptid-like entities showing up in these same areas.
That's definitely what raised the flag for me as well. It adds credence to just the parallel that we saw with this area out almost towards coastal North Carolina, and this area here in, you know, basically our backyard of Old Fort in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, and if for some reason you haven't heard the one that we're talking about, it's the episode called The Rake of Curry, North Carolina. That's the one we're talking about. Go listen to that. You'll understand what we're going on.
Pretty topical episode right now as well.
Very.
So, yeah, I thought the parallels to that were pretty interesting, to say the least.
Very. And also to have a situation. So, like, obviously this thing with the rake down there in Curry, that's way away from us. Yeah. This is right down the mountain.
Yeah. I mean, 30 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm supposed to be at a gathering on Saturday night, and I'm about to be like, hey, who wants to just pop off for a minute and maybe go down to the geyser?
Dude, please fill me in. I wish I could join you for this.
I wish you could.
I will be down in Gainesville for the weekend.
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you how it goes. I'll take some footage. I'll take the meter down there for sure. Because, I mean, dude, there might be a gang of people that wanted to maybe pop around down there. Is it open to the public at night?
I'd have to look that up, honestly.
I'll check it out before I just go stumbling in there.
Yeah. Go Scooby-Doo your way into the geyser.
That sounds so fun, though.
It does.
I'm so intrigued at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, seriously, shout out, Joe. Like, thank you for bringing this to our attention, man. Like,
Big
this
time.
is awesome. I know we might not have really provided complete closure or given you an exact thing to point to exactly what's going on here, but I think we could at least provide a little bit of context to the heavy history that is present in this area.
Oh, God, of course. Yeah. I mean, well, number one, I mean, dude, you always knock it out of the park with this stuff, but the amount of correlating evidence that you were able to bring to kind of, you know, boost what Joe had experienced down there. I mean, number one, I'm pretty much blown away that, you know, such a kind of innocuous, but also decently well-known place has this, you know, like underground paranormal scene.
Yeah.
That is just wild to me.
And then it hasn't made its way into someone's haunted Western North Carolina book yet.
That's what I'm saying. They're talking about the freaking vampires of Dillsboro, but nobody's talking about this shit. That's what's so cool, man. Like, I love being able to be like part of kind of getting the word out there about this stuff. Cause I mean, I don't know. That is one of the most unexpected things.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, like you dive into an area, and I'm not discrediting anyone's experiences whatsoever, but you start, like, you get a report of someone having a weird experience in the area, and you start digging into the records. And it's like, well, can't discredit what they said, but I just can't find anything to really explain what was going on. No, this one.
Yeah, we got a heap of information.
Yeah, for sure. So
that's wild.
This one was, you know, despite the, you know, heavy and unfortunately tragic subject material, from just a historical deep dive point, it was actually a lot of fun to kind of go into and at least be able to shed some light and provide some sort of recognition to the people that did lose their lives in this tragedy.
No doubt about that at all. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, when you kind of look around that time period in general, you find a lot of pain and suffering and mistreatment of a lot of people. But I do think that overall it is a positive thing that we were able to at least be like, hey, there is a potential that there are a bunch of people in unmarked graves buried all throughout the mountains between Asheville and Old Fort. Mm-hmm. And I think at least having that in people's minds and knowing that maybe send a little bit of positive energy out that way next time you're going down through there, it's a start.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as we mentioned, it's a stone does not erase the history of what happened, but at least it's some sort of commemorative attempt.
Hell yes. And, the people that helped put that together, it's so much better than not allowing those people to be remembered at all.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that a mayor was a big part of this too, like diving into the history of his area, writing 2 freaking books in his own play that he basically acts out from the standpoint and perspective of what these people had to tragically suffer through. Yeah. I think that's pretty cool.
It's very cool, man. Well, I tell you what, I might be going on a little Scooby-Doo trip this weekend.
Yeah,
we'll
keep
see.
me updated for sure.
Man. Man, that is wild. I mean, I really don't know quite what to expect because, I haven't been down there in so long. I don't even remember.
Yeah, and according to that update, the geyser's working sometimes, apparently. So, maybe it's on, maybe it's not.
Can you imagine? You're just like down there in the dark and then the geyser goes off and scares the living crap out of you. Well, all right, my man. Well, I guess we should probably bring the geyser to a close.
I believe so. We'll turn it off for the evening.
We will turn off the geyser for the evening. Well, I gotta say, dude, amazing work on this one. This was such a buried treasure, just like a hidden gem of this kind of wild thing. So awesome that we could be able to help put the word out there about the legacy of these people that lost their lives building this railroad, the mistreatment of these people, and at least, put any kind of awareness out about just their legacy and their memory and knowing, just how they lived and how they unfortunately died and keeping them in mind when we're around those areas. But outside of that, I think we've got another one that could be easily investigatable.
Yeah, I love when I find one and it's like, oh man, it's leaves the box open so much that you get the urge to go there yourself to see,
big time.
It's one thing to do your research and historical deep dives to provide the context. Getting boots on the ground is a whole nother experience.
Yeah, big time, ma'am. Well, thank you so much for the research that you have done. I am super excited for people to hear this episode. I found all of this to be incredibly fascinating. Thank you, Joe, for getting in touch with us and letting us know about this.
Yeah,
and
for real.
Honestly, if there's anybody else out there that has been to a place like this that maybe they don't know anything about the history, but they experienced something just unsettling and strange, who knows?
Yeah, give us a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there could be all kinds of things like this. I mean, there were skirmishes all over the place during the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. I mean, God knows what could be going on with that. But once again, thank you all for hanging in there with us. We'd like to thank everybody so much for listening to the podcast. And thank you all for your support. If you want to find out more about what we do, please go to ghostsinthemountains.com. And then you can also support us on Patreon. If you want an ad-free version of the podcast, we also have some little side information and stuff that we give away in the background. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thanks for keeping us on the air.
And if you do want to support us, but for free, feel free to just drop a little star review on whatever your listening platform is. It helps push the show out to some new listeners.
No doubt. If you look for us on Instagram, it's just Ghosts in the Mountains, or go to ghostsinthemountains.com. And thank you to everybody else. And we will catch you all on the next episode of Ghosts Stay Spooky. And if you're going to go to Andrews Geyser, make sure that you actually can. Make sure it's legal.
Yeah, we probably should have looked that up. But, Google exists.
Yeah, Google helps. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and stay spooky. All right, Austin. It's dark. You're walking around Andrews Geyser. You think you hear a noise. And the next thing you know, you hear a blast behind you. And then you just get smashed in the face by a wet buzzard.
That would be pretty traumatizing in itself. I thought you were going to go with some lip smacking and some boojum action there.
Oh, I know there's lip smacking going on around the geyser. The boojum can be anywhere at any time. He burnt down the hotel there.
Yeah, he might have.
Of course he's there. He hates
case closed.
He hates B&Bs. All right, guys. Good night, everybody. See you next time.